Hello, everybody. Hallo zusammen. We start now with our virtual and physical Brownbag. It's a hybrid event. It's an experiment for all of us, and it takes place in the Effinger co-working space. My name is Urs Vögeli. I have a dual-headed position here. On the one hand, I say hello in the name of the Effinger. That's a co-working space in the heart of Bern. It's a place where startups, innovative and creative people come together and work here. And we regularly organize some events. One of these events is the Brownbag. Until now, it took place physically here in the Effinger. But because of Corona, we try out now some new event forms, and we try to fit together a physical community here and a virtual community here in my computer. So this experiment requires quite some discipline and tolerance. And because of that, for the virtual participants, we please you to turn off the microphones. Please write your questions in the chat room. And then we will give the floor to you when we fit it together with the physical community here. And now I please you, virtual community, to wave into your cameras so that the physical community can see you. Professor He, can you wave to the camera, please? Okay, because we can see you on a big screen. We have around 12 participants here virtually, and we have around 10 participants here in the Effinger. And we try to fit this together, and because of that, we have two facilitators. One facilitator is Remo Reginold. Please wave into the camera. He will take the lead for the content, the discussions with Professor He, and Professor He is our guest speaker today. He's now in Australia, and he'll be introduced later. And he's participating virtually too. And that was one idea of this hybrid event. It's not just a physical discussion here, and the virtual people can a little bit join. And sometimes we forget them because all important things take place here. And it's cool that the guest speaker is also a virtual participant. That makes the difference between the virtual and the physical community much more smooth. Remo, our moderator, is also here in Bern, and me too. We try to facilitate this Brownbag now. It's really an experiment, and we start now, and I give the floor to Remo Reginold.
Thanks, Urs, for your introduction. I'm not sure, Professor, can you hear us? He can't hear us. You can't hear us, right? Professor He. I'm not sure if you need to switch. I guess this will be now very complicated. Something is wrong with the connection to Melbourne, but let's see. I guess now he's speaking. Professor. Indeed, it is an experiment. Let's see. We haven't. I think you're talking, right? 5 minutes ago, everything was very clear. I'm not sure if one... Say it again? Yes, this is not happening. Give me 1 second. I'm not sure if the undersea cables have been cut. By undersea drones. Urs is just trying to join now via his mobile phone to start the conversation. Just now, perhaps I'm using the time to give a small introduction into today's seminar. Hello also from my side. We have today a very special event insofar as we have a very interesting guest with us, although he's somehow muted, but we will have sorted out this problem quite soon. Professor Baogang is an expert in international affairs, but also, and I think this is now very important, he's an expert on China's internal politics. And I guess it is insofar important as we in the West might have a very flawed and perhaps also idealized perception of China and China's politics. We tend to idealize China's politics in a very narrow setup by having very an authoritarian perspective, but also a top-down understanding of how the government, the state, and the party is controlled. And I think we are all living in an era where things are changing. Yeah, our globalized world, according to the Bretton Woods principles, might have to be given up. There are new emerging countries, so-called BRICS country, and I guess China is one of the most important stakeholder within this realm. And therefore, I guess it is quite important, and I guess we owe to a certain clarity to have a better understanding of China's politics, of China's foreign affairs, and therefore, ladies and gentlemen, let's set up quickly today's seminar. Actually, we want to really focus today on China's internal politics. And having said that, obviously, there are a lot of big topics going around the world nowadays regarding Hong Kong, regarding US-China relationship, regarding the COVID-19 crisis. Against this backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to focus now really on the structural affairs, to see the system, right? And obviously, it is somehow oscillating, right, between the spheres, right? Daily politics is somehow, mirroring the structural affairs, right? But we really want to emphasize the structural issues today, right? And therefore, it is for me a tremendous pleasure to have Professor He with us, and I'm not sure if you can now respond. Can you quickly say something to see if we have your now as well audio-wise with us? So silence on all different streams, but nevertheless, let's use the time. I think we have here quite a variety of people with us, willing to share their experiences and participating in this event. Pastor can quickly come up with a question now, focusing on the physical audience here in Bern. What are the expectations of today's seminar? Do you have any, intentions which you would like to share with us? Ideas, questions? Yes.
Thank you very much. And before beginning, I'd like to really thank you for organizing this brown bag lunch. I'm very much looking forward to a very interesting debate. Maybe just to quickly introduce myself, I'm the Designate Defense Attaché for Swiss Defense Attaché in New Delhi. So I have a kind of, let's say, from India starting perspective towards China, with great interest following the latest developments within China, internal politics having certainly ramifications actually for its external politics and its relation to the Southeast Asian region, the South Asian region. And to come to your questions, I would be very much interested to learn more about the internal politics of China in order to better understand how China asserts its position in East, Southeast, and South Asia, particularly through the instrument of the Belt and Road Initiative, but also other instruments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your ideas, insights, and also the questions. And I guess you were mentioning BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and I guess this is definitely a very interesting, how do you say, a project, how to reconnect China with the world in a new way. Right, Xi Jinping has used in several occasions, projects, not only BRI, to get again re-involved with the world, but perhaps in another way than we have seen so far. What could be, the outlook and the perspective? And I guess now we are again reconnected with Professor He.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, perfect. Now
okay, good.
The show is on.
Excellent. Yeah.
So, Professor, I'm not sure if you have heard and listened to our introduction and already to the first question, but let me start with this very simple question. I mean, you are a Chinese, you are born Chinese, working now in Melbourne at the university, at Deakin University, now living and working abroad. Let me start with this very simple question. What is China for you in those days? How do you perceive China? So a very simple question, a very personal question as well.
Okay, so can I just go back to the earlier question about this Chinese influences in Southeast Asia, in particular in South Asia? Can I go back to these early questions? I'm sorry, when I turn off my video, so the quality of sound immediately improve. I can't hear you. Before that, I can't hear what you are talking about. Sorry, but let's go back to this question. So let's just look at this issue from historical perspective. So in history, China in the Ming Dynasty, in Qing Dynasty, China had a great influence in Southeast Asia. But the Chinese influence in South Asia is very, very limited. So certainly there seems a cultural kind of zone of influence there. So when the Chinese influence come across the South Asia, like today's Pakistan, India, China have a very limited influences. So that's a historical aspect. But today, it's quite amazing. In the last 2 decades, Chinese influence in South Asia has been dramatically increased. Chinese influence. We can see the Chinese presence in South Asia. And if we think about this, how does this relate to the Chinese internal politics? That's the question about it. I think that when we come to this Chinese internal politics aspect, it's extremely important. I think there's it's a kind of political economy underpinning this Chinese internal politics. So Chinese economic kind of success, and it need a new market. So it need to expand its economic globally in South Asia. So it's the first time Chinese in the last, if we look at the China, it has been went to the Bangladesh, Nepal, India, Pakistan, and clearly Chinese influences there. But behind that is really a kind of economic driving forces behind it. It's really very much economic forces. And for the economic, to understand these economic forces, its domestic politics come to play. That is, China wants to secure a big market, and for its economic sustain its economic growth, plus feed the Chinese population. So it's unprecedented that China has exercised influence in the South Asia. This momentum will, I think, in the next decades. So we already see China has exerted its great influence in the Central Asia. So the two areas, historically, China have a very little influence. One is the Central Asia, one is South Asia. Today, China seems to start to influence those two areas. So come back to Remo's early question about how do I say China? What is China? So China originally come from China. So the China still is kind of is sort of China's still important for my intellectual life, but increasingly I've become very critical about my approach to China, critical to myself, as well critical to China itself. So recently, actually, I'm writing a book. The book is about how it's taming Chinese power from this kind of global perspective. So it's critical for whole global community, how to taming this Chinese increased power becomes a global issue. And also it's very extremely important issue for CCP, Chinese Communist Party. How can exercise self-taming itself is vital for China itself. So can I stop here? Is it clear? Just one the quality of sound is okay?
Perfect.
So, okay,
all good. All good. Let me continue with, also perhaps rephrasing a little bit your aspect, how this internal politics might shift now as well foreign policy and foreign politics by quoting China official agencies and also the president himself, that we came across this very narrative of China wants to participate in global politics, want to participate in regional affairs, and thereby they always emphasize the very phenomenon of they want to do things ... with China's characteristics, right? Yeah. With Chinese characteristics. So what does these Chinese characteristics actually mean? Could you be a little bit more specific on this theme? And I think then we can go on to this very big now, black obscure box of, the Communist Party, of being something very obscure. Yeah. Yes, please, Professor.
So there are two dimensions of what's so-called Chinese characteristics. One is the empirical dimension. So empirical dimension is really important. That is, how do we understand how China do things differently? Say, example from United States. So empirically, the question is about Chinese exceptionalism. So how China do things differently from the currently international community, even from the developing countries. So when we talk about Chinese characteristic, there are many aspects of Chinese characteristic. So the one-party domination, Chinese Communist Party, that's extremely exceptional. This is the largest party in the world, the richest party in the world, controls all the state, the monies. So here is a unique condition. So if we understand Chinese politics, that's a Chinese characteristic. So that's an empirical question. That is indeed, this question is kind of deserve for us to look at this aspect. But there's another rhetorical aspect. There's ideological components. So when the Chinese officials said this is a Chinese characteristic, sometimes it's provide a sort of justifications to justify what they are doing at home, that we are different from you. So we need to separate from empirical from this rhetorical. So I normally don't bother ask this rhetorical, ideological aspect of this question. That would be a waste of a lot of time. But I do think the empirical aspect of this question is so important for us. In particular today, we need to understand China in Chinese terms. This is so important, in Chinese terms. We always use a Western frame, Western term to understand China. But when we use those terms itself, already have some distorted what's going on in China. So sometimes it's really important understanding with the Chinese characteristic in Chinese terms.
Thank you very much. I mean, Chinese terms, perhaps also, as you have said or demonstrated now very clearly, I mean, it is, again, we have a very flawed perspective on China. And perhaps also our Western concept of nationhood, statehood, state building, it might be already the wrong terms, right? Is China per se a country, a nation, or is it much more a kind of federation? I mean, geographically, it's a huge country, right? Land-wise, it is a huge country. You have provinces, and as far as I've understood and I've read China, these provinces are also, in competition with each other, and also perhaps this is also another term where we in the West might be again idealized or looking at China with an idealized gaze, is the very fact that China is not a one-party state, right? Officially. Theoretically, right? It is based on different parties. And recently, Xi Jinping, I think it was in 2018, declared officially that our political system is based on a multi-party cooperation, right? Could you be here as well a little bit more specific? I mean, regarding this federalist understanding, and perhaps also the concepts of nationhood might be different in China, and perhaps also this multi-party aspect.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. This is a really excellent question. This is we come to the fundamental of what is a Chinese state. So China's state is not based on a nation. So in the West, the kind of prevailing concept is a one nation, one state. So each nation entitled to have one state. So Chinese state is based on a kind of civilization, which will include a variety of the nations. So starting points of Chinese state, they have long history. Those long history is kind of most Chinese state is an imperial state. That's imperial state always go beyond different nations. So that's a starting point. So that is a mark. China is a really, China has in the modern day has been resisting this Western notion of nation statehood. That's a one nation is entitled to the state. So when we come to the issue concerning Tibet, Uyghurs, so here clearly Chinese have a perception of civilization state. So China has a large historical civilization. I think that India also holds a similar kind of view. The India also is kind of civilization-based state. And it's important for us to understand this foundation of Chinese state. It's kind of civilization-based state with the imperialist features. And that's come back to the issue of the Chinese federal system. China is a top-down unitary system. It's inherit a lot the imperial system, but at the same time they do have a lot local autonomy when it comes to economic power. So one of the amazing things when I was taught in University of Tasmania, so Australia is a federal state, but I realized one thing when I was taught in the Tasmania, I found the Chinese province, those head governor, they enjoy much more autonomous power than their counterpart governor in Tasmania. So theoretically, China is a unitary system, a communist top-down. But if we look at the empirically, how this, so in Australia is a state, they call state, China calls the province. So if you look at those local officials, how much power they have, how in particular autonomous power, how much they come to investment. So in Tasmania case, very little money, small issue, you need to get federal approval. But in China, those province leaders, they just make decision, several million, even 100 million, then they can make a decision. So here it's very interesting. So it's look at how the Chinese system operate in real life. Come back to this multi-party cooperation. So China does have a lot what they call democratic party, but those democratic parties do not hold executive power. They are only being consulted by the CCP. So the Chinese Communist Party tried to regulate their relationship between Chinese Communist Party with the what's called the 7 major democratic parties. So one of the interesting things is when the party CCP before they make a major decision, they will always hold a consultation meeting with those big 7 democratic party, discuss some of the issues. So they even have they call it bi-weekly, fortnightly, currently in the Chinese political consultative meeting. Fortnightly, they hold a regular discussion within the Chinese Communist Party and those 7 major democratic parties. But it's a consultative. Those unlike different from the West. So you have a multi-party. Each party you have a chance to take over the power. But for China, those democratic parties never have a hope to take power.
Thank you very much for this clarification. And now, I mean, you have mentioned now for several times CCP, I mean, the China's Communist Party. I mean, a very simple question, straightforward. How is the party functioning and how is the party structured? And based on this structure, how is the party interconnected with economy, with the juridical system, with internal political affairs? Very simple question. I guess a very complicated answer, right?
Yeah. So understand the Chinese Communist Party is the best from the traditional Chinese political system perspective. So what I suggest when we understand, if we want to understand what is Chinese Communist Party, it might be easier for us to understand this party is actually is a kind of is a sort of emperor party. So in the Asian China, you always have emperor. So emperor unify whole China, everything around this emperor. So the emperor is a core of the power. But today, the Chinese Communist Party, in particular, the General Party Secretary, is functionally look like the traditional emperor too. So everyone have to follow this party. Party is a core of whole society. If you maintain this party, the party's rule, then whole society is stable. So the parties is exercise kind of the ultimate powers, and without the open challenge. And this party, it's quite interesting if we come this how this party operate. It's very interesting if we compare United States with China. So this is kind of from the imperialist imperial perspective of the party. And quite striking, party never give in. Party never give in to commercial interests. Party always want to control commercial sector, business sector. Throughout those 2,000 or 3,000 year Chinese history, the emperor always control the business sector. So like the Trump, a business people can be a president. It's kind of unthinkable in the Chinese Confucian culture. In the Confucian culture, no business people can be made the top of the power holders. So this is when you mention this early question, the party's relation to the economy business. So party is in command. Party control economy, but within Deng Xiaoping's reform, what is Deng Xiaoping introduced is the party control the macro policy and develop the macro regulation, but then give a lot of space for small private business to do what they like to do. But the parties always ensure they can control the business. This is important. That's the Chinese kind of civilization for the last 2,000-3,000 years.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, there are a lot of details we could discuss, but what we have seen now in recent years, and especially with the leadership and with Xi Jinping, we have seen somehow, and please be correct me, we have seen a shift in power, right, and in centralization. Yeah. I mean, previous leaders, they were much more reluctant in setting up, obviously, a one-party stream, but nevertheless keeping a certain plurality. And this is now somehow shifting with Xi Jinping by having now again, you know, Xi Jinping positioning his people and his important figures within key positions. Is this something you could support as well, this position or this view, or are you saying no, this is just a very another Western attitude of looking at the Chinese party? Or do you see a certain centralization of decision making process or processes?
So if we adopt the historical perspective, so what's happened currently is a part of the big political cycle. So Chinese civilization, political civilization, always a cycle pattern. So they were several years or several decades. You will have a very strong centralized power. Then after that, they run into its own problems. Then they start to relax, start to decentralize. But so after the certain period, they will find that there's a problem associated with those decentralization. Then they go back to centralization again. So Chinese political system always kind of go and between those decentralization, centralization. So currently Xi Jinping era is a kind of another wave of decentralization. But then we can expect that after this maybe 1 decade, there's so many internal problems. Then there will be another wave of this decentralization. So this is a kind of part of the Chinese political cycle.
Okay, so you say it's not really connected with the person Xi Jinping, but much more with the broader historical and systematic understanding of China, the current centralization.
Well, certainly, individual leader play certain roles, but from the long historical perspective, and this is the way they're doing. And we go back to this Chinese characteristic. That is a Chinese characteristic of the politics. So after a few years, decentralization, then go to the recentralization. And if not the Xi, then someone else, he probably do the similar kind of things.
Perhaps also to keep certain strategies flawed, right? And not very clear, right? Could that be, from a strategic point of view, an aspect of it?
I'm not sure what's your questions.
I mean, your question is just like having the cycles of, centralization and decentralization means that somehow it also makes other country or keeps, relationship and trying to understand China very complicated, right?
The Chinese, it's complicated from outside the perspective. But from inside China, so people just sort of, okay, this is because we get too many problems before under the Hu Jintao period. At that time, they are talking about the 9 Politburo members. Each one controls one area. So the whole centralized power was fragmented, divided. So then it's chaotic sometimes. So the general party actually cannot touch some area. He cannot touch it. So this is the issue needed to be fixed. So she is the kind of person to deal with this kind of problems. So that's in the logics there. So there, of course, there's another logic is the external influences. So when the American press China, force China to centralize power quickly and a more comprehensive way in order to wage a war against the United States. So the pressure actually makes Chinese more politically more mobilized. But that's an external effect, but largely it's internally. So if you look at the Chinese history, always that historically, usually one one dynasty lasts 200, 300 years, but in the end, the collapse divided. And then through this bloody war, then China unified, then decentralized, and for another 200 or 300 years, then they divided again. So that's kind of pattern. Yeah.
Okay, this is a very interesting aspect. Okay, thank you very much for that remark. I would like to open up to the floors now to perhaps summarize the first section and then going to the international dimension. Are there any questions within the virtual community? I'm not sure. Are you following? You're following the chat. Are there specific questions related to the topic we have discussed now with Professor He? Not particular. I give it to the floor here in Bern.
Hello. You talked about the cycles of centralization, decentralization, and I think it is also mirrored in the policy in China that at least until now, there was always a change after, I think, like in the United States, after 2 terms, 8 years or 10 years, you would have a new leader. And now she obviously has changed his policy. He is going to be, as far as we can see for now, the eternal leader. Might this also be any suggestion to a actual policy change, like in the real core of the policy?
Yeah. So Deng Xiaoping introduced these 2 terms, the rules. That's really revolution. It's really revolutionary in Chinese history, in the Chinese Communist Party history. It's really revolution. So unfortunately, we see this Xi, under the Xi, so he just gave up these 2 terms. So he wants to be a president in life. So this is, I actually written a long Chinese paper against this, abolish those 2 terms. And unfortunately, what we see, this Chinese long history kind of play out again. So I always come back to this long Chinese history. So the 2-term limits is extremely exception in Chinese history. The life emperor is a norm. So this is a problem for China. So if China will really want to be a modernized, to be a really kind of, they want to build a party state constitutionally, introduce, reinforce those 2 terms, so important. Yeah, I have seen there's a few questions. Should I ask the question? There's some question in the
Baogang, you might have seen it on the virtual chat. There are some questions. Yeah. Please go ahead. I'm just like quickly highlighting them. Tell us, please, about the fractions in the party. You guys here. That could be very interesting question. And then what are the centered one regarding regions, industries, clans, and otherwise?
Yeah. So the factions in party is so important. So what we see under Xi Jinping is something, one significant change going on. In the past, you have a youth league faction. So that was related to the Chinese open reform period. When China's when started the reform, they need a young cadres. So at that time, under Deng Xiaoping's leadership, he pushed very hard, tried to recruit those young youth leader to be a regional provincial leader. So slowly, those youth league leaders become a big faction within the party. But under Xi Jinping, there's a youth league college. There was a school cultivation, training those youth league. This school itself was abolished. So we will see the declining of the youth league faction. At the same time, this is it's so important. That's related to the next the question next. That is about defense issue. So what we start to say is that those who work for defense industry increasingly going into a top leadership position. So the question was or not those defense industry people will form a new faction. At the moment, it's too early to say, but that will be a critical issue for China in the future development. So let me say this second question. What are the center of the region, industry, crime, otherwise, faction? Yeah. So come back to this factionalism. So in the old days, factionalism in the early period of Republic of China, say in the early 1911, 20, 30, 40, even early history of Chinese Communist Party was based on region. That is where the people come from. The same region are more likely form a faction. But this kind of region-based faction was gone in contemporary China. So here you can see some the progress in Chinese history. So now I'll just mention this new faction is based on the military industry. That's important, based on military industry. So clan, the traditional clan is gone. The clan still plays certain role in the village politics, but in the national politics, provincial politics, gone. It's already gone. But maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, clan played significant, important role in politics. Stand clans still play very important role in South Asia, but the clan no longer play very important role as a base for faction. Okay, so let's see this defense sector is the one. Yes, I already said.
Okay, thank you. We still have 10 minutes to go, and I would like to focus now on the relationship between China's internal politics and their going west, going global strategy. And perhaps, and I think I'm coming straight forward to the point, there is a very interesting phenomenon, and most probably not very known in Western countries, that China and Xi Jinping is not only, orchestrating this going global strategy by himself and some of his entourages, but also in relationship with these so-called leading small groups, so-called LSGs. Could you be a bit more specific on these LSGs, and also in reference to this, China's signature project, the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, so this is a kind of, so the one way Xi Jinping want to re-centralize is to form this small leading group. So he always will be ahead of this small group. So what's happened that you already have existing state institutions. So it's difficult to dismantle existing institution. So what they do is a build layer on top of the existing institution that is a leading small group that will control this existing institution. So this is a way she tried to kind of regain the centralized power. So one Belt One Road, they have this kind of small group to control it. And One Belt One Road, there are so many discussion now on these issues. So I have written a paper on that. So if anyone interested, so you might Google, look at I'll talk about the papers, and the title of the paper is The Domestic Politics of the Belt and Road Initiative. So I've been discussed the various aspects of domestic aspect of Belt and Road Initiative. And this Belt and Road Initiative currently quieted down a little bit. But so what's in China is very interesting is suppose she stepped up. Suppose if he's gone, will Belt and Road Initiative still there? So my answer is that the name probably will gone, but the practice, those projects probably still on, be largely driven by Chinese economy.
Okay, very interesting. could you perhaps, and now perhaps again a little bit from a meta perspective, see a little bit more about how you could relate China's internal politics and especially the party with China's going global strategy, and thereby not only emphasizing the BRI but also other projects which might be not very obvious or not very known in the West?
Yes. So one of the things probably we need to watch on this is how the China starts to kind of exercise the global influences. It's China has last few years promote this idea of rights to development, or the what we might call the development-based approach to human rights. So in the past, Western dominant theory is Western view is a rights-based approach to development. If you need development, you need to protect human rights. So protect human rights is a fundamental way for economic development. So what China do is reverse logic. So that is, in order to develop human rights, you need to focus on economic development first. So if you have economic development first, logically, when you develop so fast, you need to encourage people moving around. So that means you have to give protect people's social rights to social mobility, which currently does not exist in North Korea. So this is interesting. What do we see currently? That's in 2017, last 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, last 3 years, China table development related agenda in UN Human Rights Council. In each time, roughly 30 countries, most are developing countries, support Chinese proposal, fully supported. And each time, about a dozen, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a bit low, from the Western country oppose Chinese these proposals. So what we say, this is clearly a global division. Developing countries support these rights to development. Western countries rejected. They emphasize more rights, civic and political rights. So here is, I think, examples. That's we are paying attention to Belt and Road Initiative. That's kind of infrastructure project. But here we have another case at the ideological level. China brought a new way to develop, and then gained the support. I was amazed the other day. I look in the Human Rights Quarterly in the last few years. No paper published on this topic, but then I look at this effort of human rights in the last 2 or 3 years. They publish more than a dozen papers about this development approach to human rights. Even some authors openly call China to do more. They said the United States don't like this idea because they already developed. They don't bother it, but they really like China take the leadership to implement this development-based agenda at the global stage. So not only just you have a proposal, but you need to do something. So the last year, what China do is kind of ask the UN Human Rights Council to authorize to form a special commission to study feasibility of this development-based approach to human rights.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. And it just like supports also the perspective we have developed over now a couple of years, researching on China and their going global strategy at the Swiss Institute for Global Affairs. And I would just like to add the very fact that it is, we call it so-called the hidden Silk Roads, right? What China is strategically following is not only, implementing infrastructure, economic relations, but through gaining position in international standardization bodies like the WHO, like a telecommunication standardization bodies, they are gaining influence, and not by only gaining influence, they are shaping the world, but they are standardizing the world via Chinese characteristics, right? I would like to give now again for a couple of seconds, minutes, the mic to the floor. Perhaps starting with the virtual floor. Is there anybody commenting anything? I don't see, or is there something, Urs? Okay, that's one question. The relationship between the fractions and the BRI, and from the floor here in Bern, another question you would like to come up with regarding, China's going global strategy?
So, comment this really excellent questions. What is the likely impact of the BRI on the relative power of the faction within the party? So, I think that clearly with continuation of BRI, so the faction, those export industry-based faction, will gain more and more power, economic power, influence within the party. Then the other things I just said it before, this military industry-based faction, that faction probably will increasingly gain its influence too. So this new faction is really it's a fascinating. So let's go back to the Jiang Zemin period. He proposed a new theory called the three representative. The three representative is a sort of revolutionize the nature of Chinese Communist Party. So Chinese Communist Party was based on the peasants and the workers. With the idea of three representatives, the party should represent the most advanced productive forces. Means Chinese Communist Party should recruit more capitalists, even those kind of capitalist boss, as a party member, even to be a party boss. So that way, they are fundamentally redefine the nature of the Chinese party. At the local level, we already say this new faction based on those business become more and more powerful. So this comes back to my earlier remark, that is China is a Confucian civilization. Historically, China will never accept business presidents like United States, or business like the president, business like head of the state. So at the moment, at national level, that is still the case. But at the local level, it's already fundamental change. Many of those business people become the village party secretary, even also are elected to be the deputy in township, even become head of the township. So that is change the nature of Chinese politics from the below. I don't know to what extent they will fundamentally change the Confucian regulation about the business and the politics. Now, this is the question. This is all related to the issue of the faction within party. How those new factions, one of the crucial factions, when we talk about faction, so theoretically, China still refuses to openly legitimize those factions. Now, that's important. In the Western context, factions are legitimate. They should give the open voice, competing power. So in China, despite you have those factions, you are not allowed to articulate your own interests competing for political power. You are only you apply a certain subtle rule, close the door. So that is a different.
Okay, thank you very much, Baogang. I allow one short question and a short answer from you, and then we need to end.
Thank you very much, and apologies for taking the floor again. First of all, thank you very much, Professor, for your very, very informative presentation. That was extremely helpful. I fear that my question probably could fill a lot of space by answering it. It's a relation now, particularly with COVID-19. Now, China being in foreign relations under quite heavy criticism for how it handled the crisis. Based on your experience, what kind of internal reflections within the Communist Party could you imagine would be going on? And what kind of impact could that have on foreign policy? Just in a nutshell. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when it comes to the foreign policy, we already see China they have already done a lot internal reflection on this on these issues, and we already see China develop a new policy that is to try to use this opportunity to support some developing countries, send those masks, the health instrument to the developing countries. So that's already happened. And when come to this is the issue. So we come to this. We have this Australia and also European Union in WHO proposed to form a global inquiry into this origin of the COVID-19. So at the beginning, Beijing was very angry against Australia's proposals. But in the end of the day, with certain modifications, and Beijing even also support that we need a global inquiry. So we don't know how this will go so far. And the way China is doing is always this kind of internally. They will look at those matters seriously without any open transparency. So this Australia proposal is from Australia perspective it is common sense. So if we have such scale of disaster, you need a royal commission to look at it. And so in the case of COVID-19, we need a global inquiry. So far, China, when it comes to this global inquiry, global institution, with an aim to taming China always resistant. So here, I think that's great for China to learn how to develop a self-imposing taming in the interest of global community. Also, it is the interest of the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay, so thank you very much, Baogang, for sharing your experiences with us. I need to stop here, unfortunately, because we have workers coming back to the office floor, and we need to give back the floor. Thank you very much to Melbourne thank you to Bern here, to the audience, and also to our virtual community, wherever they are. Please follow us on globalaffairs.ch. We release a lot of papers, reports, but also map visualizations on this very particular topic. And yeah, thank you for being with us. And thank you again, Professor, for sharing your experiences with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, organizers,
Thank you.
for that. Thank you.